Hello, you're listening to The Rare Life. I'm your host, Madeline Cheney, and today I'm super excited to kick off season 4. So I would first love to welcome all of our newcomers that joined in season 3. I know a lot of you are new, and I'm so happy that you're joining us. If you haven't yet, be sure to listen to the preface episode way back before season 1. It's my first ever episode released, and in it I share kind of the why behind the podcast and my story of when I first found out that Kimball had any medical issues and what that was like leading up to his birth. So it's a good listen. I recommend giving that a listen after this one. So as I mentioned in season 3's finale episode, the theme this season is a little different and needs some explaining. So in season 1, the theme was kind of child-centric around their diagnosis. So we talked a lot about therapies and things like that. In season 2, we talked about how our child's medical issues have affected us personally. And then this last season, as you probably remember, because it was a whole 2 weeks ago, was all about how our relationships have been affected. And as has been the plan all along, we will cycle back through those themes over and over and over again. And that is because I kind of feel like these 3 themes sum up everything that we could possibly talk about. So all of these topics can kind of be sorted into those. And that means that we get to cycle back to the theme from season 1, which was more child-centric and looking at their diagnoses and kind of medical interventions. So there are episodes about advocacy, both in the medical world and educational, hospitalization tips and financial talk, machine dependency, things like that. I'm really excited about this theme because it's a little bit more hands-on, and I think you'll have a lot of takeaways to translate over to real life. And it's always a little bit of a challenge selecting the topics for episodes to make sure that they are generalized enough to be applicable to most listeners. And, with this season theme, it's even harder than ever because all of our children vary in their diagnoses. But I'm thinking we were able to grab a lot of these topics that most of you will care about. So I really hope that you're able to take some things away from this and that life will be just a little bit easier. One of the awesome things about cycling around and using the same theme as a year ago is that you can go back and listen to season 1's episodes if you haven't already, kind of in tandem with this season. And I think that'll be really cool because they just go together really well. So if you're one of my newer listeners, I encourage you to go back there and browse through the topics and see what interests you and give those some listens. So as promised, I will give you glimpses into the upcoming 4 episodes of season 4. And really quick, before I jump into that, I will remind you the sequence of episodes. We'll have first a parent story and then a parent special topic. That is when the parent who just gave their story episode gets to come back and teach us about something that they have learned in this medically complex parenting journey. After the parent special topic, we have a professional episode and then my solo episodes. So our very first story episode of season 4 is the story of Evalie, a 5-year-old born without eyes and a series of medical complexities with no overall diagnosis to bring it all together. Her mom, Tamika, is really great at opening up and being vulnerable, and I really loved that in both of her episodes. In her story episode, among other things, she talks about what it was like to have the pandemic breakout and have everyone go into quarantine and for them to realize that their family's lifestyle did not change at all and that her whole life has been a quarantine to help her daughter be safe. And so I know that's really relatable for a lot of parents. And I appreciated her opening up about that. Her special topic episode is all about medical advocacy. So Tamika has had more than her fair share of advocating hard for her daughter She's had 3 separate scenarios of knowing that something was up with her daughter, but not knowing exactly what, and having to advocate super hard to get any kind of testing or answers, which then led to finding heart failure, then severe sleep apnea, and then epilepsy. And she gives us lots of tips for advocating in a medical setting. That one is also a great one. Then our first professional episode of this season is actually about advocating in an educational setting with IEP expert Catherine Witcher. And she shares her top 3 pieces of advice for us when advocating for our children in IEP meetings. And I learned a lot from it, and I'm really excited to share that with you. Lastly is my first solo episode of season 4. And in that, I share all about Kimball's blindness. And this was one of the most devastating diagnoses that we received when Kimball was 9 months old. And in that episode, I talk about how I handled that being added on to an already unbearable list. And those who have been in this community for a while now know that this episode has been a long time coming. All right, I hope you enjoy the clips.
Sometimes I get so afraid to get comfortable where we are. I feel like I have to be ready for the next thing, just be mentally prepared to hear the next thing. And that is so exhausting to try to prepare yourself in a mental way or an emotional way to hear another diagnosis for your child. You shouldn't have to beg for screens. We shouldn't have to beg for exams. We shouldn't have to beg for tests. We should be able to go inside of a facility or a space and say, hey, something is going on and I need you to help me get to the bottom of it. And they need to do absolutely that. And we absolutely have to constantly remind ourselves why we do this and who we're doing it for, so that we can tap into that strength and to be able to keep going, to be able to keep moving, to be able to keep fighting.
I always say IEP goals should be exciting. And people look at me like, what do you mean? Like, this is a deficit. My child's behind. We're working really hard on this. And the teacher's like, I'm exhausted. I'm like, but if we pick the right goals, then it's so exciting because we get to improve quality of life and truly start creating this individualized program that's going to help a child move through faster because we're all excited. We're all cheering. It doesn't feel like a heavy weight that we're carrying around. It feels like something we want to work towards.
He doesn't know any different. A lot of people tell me that when they're trying to comfort me. He doesn't know any different. He doesn't know that he's supposed to see or hear or any of these other things. But I know better. I can see. I can hear. So many of the best experiences of my life are from seeing things, from hearing them, seeing a beautiful scene outside, seeing my loved ones' faces, that connection it brings. Well, I hope you're as stoked for season 4 as I am. Consider it officially kicked off. You can follow me on Instagram at the_rare_life and like the Facebook page, The Rare Life Podcast, to learn about episodes being released. See you next time.